I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Ken Burns, one of the producers of a new docuseries called Muhammad Ali that is now broadcasting on PBS. We talked about why he decided to make this film and Ali's life and legacy. Take a listen. Ken, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So this docuseries about Muhammad Ali, incredibly famous person, not only in America, but around the world. Books have been written about him, movies have been made about him, documentaries have been made about him. Yeah. What drew you to this topic, wanting to throw your amazing talents at this subject, and what can viewers expect to learn and see that is new and different?
Well, I think you're right, Charles. There's so many wonderful. Let's just stick to documentaries about Muhammad Ali, and a couple of them are among the greatest documentaries ever made. They focus on a particular fight or a series of fights or a particular couple years in his life. Sarah Burns, David McMahon, my co-directors, and I were interested in a deeper dive. We'd done the Central Park 5 movie, did a biography of Jackie Robinson, and we wanted to do soup to nuts, from boyhood and birth and boyhood in segregated Jim Crow, Louisville, Kentucky, to death by Parkinson's. Not that long ago, 2016. Why is obvious. Muhammad Ali is one of the greatest figures in all of American history. I didn't say sports. He is the greatest sportsman in American history. His life intersects with all of the main themes at the end of the back half of the 20th century. That is to say, the role of sports in society, the role of the black athlete, definitions of black masculinity and black manhood, civil rights, and its changing dimensions, not its one-thingness, faith and religion. And of course, he joins a separatist religious cult that also has an evolutionary story to it. Politics, war, sex, I mean, you name it, he's intersected in all of those themes that I mentioned are ones we're still grappling with today. And I think in the end, this resolves not just as a story about boxing, not just a story about politics, which is, of course, just a kind of on-off, yes-no, 1 and a 0, but something more dynamic and complex, a story about freedom. It's incredibly difficult for a black person to escape the specific gravity of the injustices visited by white people on them in the last 402 years on this century. It's about courage, not just inside the ring. This is a brutal, difficult, hard sport, but the courage it took, say, in his life to refuse induction in the United States Army. And then it's about love. This man who was reviled by a large segment of the United States population in the 60s and early 70s, dies the most beloved person on his planet. We wanted to know the answers to all the whys, that those things, why did this happen? Why was it this way? What is the nature of those fights? What are the things we can learn? But also how he influenced the age, and the age in which he was born influenced him.
Let's talk a little bit about that evolution. As you mentioned, he dies a beloved figure, but he was not a universally beloved figure when he was in his prime. He was a divisive figure. Some people loved him, but some people really saw him as a threat or really did not like his kind of comportment. Talk to us about the period when he is divisive and what he meant to America at that point.
Certainly. Well, let's just maybe also let's try to rearrange the molecules of our presumptions, our conventional wisdom, the baggage that we all carry around. Maybe it's not him who's divisive. Maybe it's us who's divisive. So here's a man growing up in sports who is loud, he brags, he's not behaving the way a typical athlete does. He's saying, I'm black, I'm proud, I'm beautiful, look how handsome I am, I'm pretty as a girl, you know, I've had 182 amateur fights, I've 22 professional fights, and, you know, all of that stuff. And that's not the way athletes were supposed to behave, and certainly not the way black athletes were supposed to behave. Strike one. Then after he wins the heavyweight championship by defeating Sonny Liston improbably in an amazing fight, he announces relatively soon that he's been a member of the Nation of Islam, a separatist religious cult that's already been deemed by mainstream media a hate group. Separatism goes against what the main tenets of the integrationist civil rights movement that most Americans have come to understand and support. And then he, strike two, then he refuses induction into the draft. Now, this is a personal faith-based decision, but we can't see a black person making that. That's got to be just a political decision. He's got to be deliberately giving a middle finger to America, and it's not. It's based on faith, and so that's strike three. And so for a long time, he has to receive and somehow take the opprobrium of lots of people. And even as he's working his way back, which he does after losing 3.5 years in the prime of his career fighting the United States government over this, and is eventually vindicated, he is reviled. I also think it's important to say that I think the divisiveness might have been coming from the rest of us, and I also think it's important to remember that from the very beginning he was speaking to people not just in the United States but around the world about an affirmative sense of oneself, one's blackness, one's beauty, one's power. And there were a lot of people, including my family, who adored him. We just thought he was fabulous. We were against the war in Vietnam, so that strike three for most Americans was a grand slam home run.
Was there anything in the film that actually surprised you in your research? Or how many things?
You know what? If I ask you or us to suspend this conventional wisdom, the baggage we carry along, the superficial stuff, I've got to do it too. So this has been a 7-year process. We had to leave behind what I thought I knew. I remember when he won gold in Rome in 1960. I was 7 years old. I certainly remember the Liston fight. I remember every aspect of this, and I knew nothing. And so each day of this production was a kind of study in humility and the acquisition of all of the things that you don't know. Some are quotidian, ordinary, plain, a kind of generosity in one moment, a generosity across his life towards other people. Sometimes it's the pettiness and the real vituperative comments he made about Joe Frazier, his principal ally. I mean, he was using, as Todd Boyd, the scholar, said from USC, he's using the language a white racist would use to describe a black man. And he said, and here's the ultimate conscious black guy doing that. What do you do? And he says, I think in this case he used his powers for evil instead of good, which reminds you that we're dealing with a superhero here. And Achilles had his heel and his hubris. So I can't. There were thousands, if not millions, of things that we learned in the course of it that helped to change the dynamics of what we go into our consideration of Muhammad Ali. We certainly don't shy away from showing his flaws. He's serially unfaithful to his wives. He does use the language of a racist against his black opponents, and he basically abandons, on the orders of Elijah Muhammad, the head of the Nation of Islam, he abandons his friend, dear friend and mentor, Malcolm X, in just the weeks and months before Malcolm X was murdered by the Nation of Islam. And there's some complicated dynamics. What's so great about Muhammad Ali is that he understood all of these by the end of his life and made attempts to atone and to rectify for all of those three principal main failings. But the other way, he's the greatest boxer ever, and it's just you have to shake your head at some of the beauty. They're announcers who sometimes you're never supposed to go back when somebody's throwing a punch. You duck. Going back is the end of your career, and he did that. And people going, you can hear the announcers going, oh, nobody does that. The chances he takes, and it looks like a kind of poetry in motion.
So let's talk about a little bit one of the superhero qualities, which is just an innate understanding of stagecraft.
Yes.
And kind of public response and what the public is hungry for, and an ability to read into his opponents even and pick apart their psyche a bit and dismantle them before he even throws a punch. Talk a little bit about whether or not he fully understood that he was exercising this power in the way that he was.
I think he was born. I mean, Michael Bent said he came out of the womb doing some of these impossible boxing things. I think he came out of the womb sort of understanding promotion in a fundamental way that none of us will ever really get. And he did shape each fight, not just the interior of the fight in the rounds and between the rounds, but the lead up to the fight in dramatic terms. He'd learned very early on from a pro wrestler, Gorgeous George, that it didn't matter if you were hated or despised. In fact, people seemed to be paying really, really good money to go and watch this guy be a villain. And so he understood in a way that was okay. And it permitted him, I think, in an interim period, as he's forming his own philosophy and his own sense of self and his own purpose in a larger world, it allows him to be the villain and not care, to be a bragger, to recite the poetry, to predict the rounds, his things, or to be cruel to people and define this. This is throughout his career. There's a kind of genius to it, and there's a love too. There's a, as much as we can fault him for the way he treated Frazier, he's funny. He's really good. I can drown a drink of water and kill a dead tree. It's perfect. And he's challenging all of our assumptions just about everything, certainly about race and masculinity, about humor, about sports, about competition, about sportsmanship, about race, about religion. He is going against the grain. And I think early on, understanding, as he said, boo, hiss, throw peanuts, but whatever you do, pay to get in. That he understood what P.T. Barnum understood, just as long as they spelled your name right, it was okay. And then what's so wonderful for the rest of us is that he began to take on all of this American stuff. So when the Supreme Court liberates him from his prison sentence on an 8-0 decision, but on a technicality, they're not acknowledging his right to be a conscientious objector, and don't get me started there. He could have gloated, he could have recited poetry, he could have done anything. Instead, when a reporter shoves a microphone and says, "What do you think of the system now?" expecting that kind of gloating or that kind of, "I'm vindicated, I'm the greatest, I told you I was the greatest," whatever, he goes, "Well, I don't know who's going to be assassinated tonight. I don't know who's going to be enslaved. I don't know who's going to experience injustice or inequality." He's thinking back 350 years to the treatment of black people on this continent. He's thinking about Emmett Till, who is not much older than him, whose mother had the courage to have an open casket. Jet magazine photographed that open casket. There wasn't a black person in America who didn't see those pictures, and millions of others saw them as well, that helped galvanize a modern civil rights movement because of the sheer injustice. But you got to wonder, if you're a kid, is this going to happen to me? And he's ranging ahead to names he couldn't have known: the Rodney Kings, the Trayvon Martin, the 11-year-old Tamir Rice, 11 years old, Breonna Taylor from Louisville, his hometown, and of course, Floyd. But I'm sorry to say, Charles, as you know, thousands of other names who should be living and aren't, because of that same system that momentarily freed him. So he goes, "Yeah, this is a victory for me, but," and it's just speaks to his power, his maturity, his sense of purpose. That's how you die the most beloved person on your planet, willing to take risks and become, a difficult word for us to talk about, an apostle of love. This is what this man was. He was beloved on this planet by billions, that's with a B, people.
Ken Burns, thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait for everyone to get a chance to see this fascinating docuseries so I can discuss it with my friends.
Yes, well, thank you. It's streaming for free on PBS.org and the PBS video app, and it's Roku, and it's Apple, and it's Amazon. All of those platforms, you can see it for free.
Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
Once again, we would like to thank Ken Burns for his time.